With this movie, we're going to make a little subsection within our animation area of how to do a head turn using actions. Doing head turns is one of the most complex things that you can do with a 2D animation package because it involves changing so many things smoothly so that it makes sense visually when you see it in action. That's the reason you'll see certain animated features that are on television that are quite popular, why the characters are perfectly flat, and when they look from left to right, there is no in-between step. Their head automatically kicks right over to the full other direction, and part of it's because it's so much work to get it set up. However, working with Anime Studio Pro, the actions enables you to do those type of things much more easily, but there are still quite a few steps involved to make that happen. So let's get started with this. We'll import something that we've already seen before. We'll come down to an Illustrator file, and in your working folder, working file section, 07 section, we'll import the robot.ai again. That pops in here and we see the robot.ai layer added. What we're going to need to do is divide up this character right here as it's been imported into a couple layers, because we're going to also be working with the depth sorting we learned in a couple movies preceding this. So we need to add the layers. We already have one in here because it's a new document, and I'm simply going to name this Bolt Right. Then we'll add another vector layer. I'll double click on that. We'll name this Bolt Left. Then we've got our main robot. The next step, as we also learned in Actions, is to create a parent group for the object. I'll go ahead and select New Group. We'll rename this something really original like Bot Head, so we know that's the parent group, and move it to the top. The next thing is I'm just going to simply drag the layers into that folder group, and then we'll begin building our actions. One of the reasons I'm choosing an object with a cylindrical head is to show you a little more easily how this takes place. When you're working with organics like people or dogs or anything that has, protruding noses, there's the same steps apply, but it's a little easier to see it with this simple cylindrical shape. So let's get started. The first thing we'll need to do is cut these bolts off out of the main robot AI and put them on their separate bolt layers. I will shift to my select tool, keyboard shortcut G, select both that and come to Edit and say Cut. You can also use the keyboard shortcut to your system to do that. With that cut out, I'll come back down to Bolt Right and do Paste. So that's in place now. We'll go back to the robot layer. We'll do the exact same thing and cut that out and put it back on the Bolt Left layer. Well, now we're ready to start building our actions. We've got the main head and the neck on the robot layer. And actually, I suppose I could rename that to Head to just make it a little more clear, and then Bolt Left and Right. What we'll do is create an action for this forward-looking area so we can always return to it with the click of a button. And then we will set up the actions for the left look, and we could do the same thing for the right-facing look. We'll just do left in this example. So the first thing to do is come up to the top layer, Bot Head, and create a new action. We'll name this action Facing Forward. And essentially all we're doing with this action is keyframing everything that you see right now just the way it is. So with that done, let's go ahead and move to Timeline 1, Frame 1. We've got Facing Forward highlighted. Our timeline has changed color, so we know we're working in this action, and we're at the Bot Head level. Now watch what happens right here. I'm going to come down to Head. I select that. We're still in the Facing Forward action, and this is very important because that doesn't happen in just a few steps. We've got this set up right now. I want to go ahead and select everything on this layer, and I'm going to click on the Layer Translate Points tool. By clicking once on the shape, it automatically adds keyframes for us right here. Now I'm going to go to Bolt Left layer, and this is where it becomes very important to follow these steps very carefully. It's not complicated, but if you don't follow them in order, it can create some headaches later on. When I select the Bolt Left, look what our Actions palette did. it automatically kicked us back to the main timeline and changed the color of our timeline. Not something we want to do. So with the bolt left layer selected, I'm going to double click on facing forward, which opens this action again, but now we're working on a different layer with this action that was created on the very top level. We're on time frame 1. We've got the bolt automatically selected. I'm going to click once on that. It adds keyframes for us, but this is going to be an important step now. Since we're going to be working with depth sorting, I want to make sure that the bolt always occurs at a certain value, or that we can change that value. To start with, our face is on 0. Everything you import has a Z depth, or distance from the camera, of 0. I'm going to give this a negative layer depth by selecting the Layer Translation tool, coming up to the Z value on the top, and doing negative 0.01. Not very far back at all, but just far enough back that we can tell the program what to do with it later. And select OK. Looks like nothing changed. I'm going to come to the bolt right and do the exact same thing. I select that layer, but I have to come back to my Actions palette and double click on facing forward. With everything selected, I'm going to go, since I have the Layer Translation tool already selected, and enter the value negative 0.01 again. And then I want to come back up to my regular translation tool and click once to set keyframes for the positions of those points at the very beginning. In our next movie, we'll go ahead and pick up from right here, and we'll start changing the shapes of our head for the head turn.